We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Rock Art Podcast with Dr. Alan Garfinkel, a podcast about all things rock art. Send us your suggestions.
Hello out there in Archaeology Podcast land. This is Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'm the president and founder of the California Rock Art Foundation. And what we do is we identify, evaluate, manage, and conserve rock art both in Alta California and in Baja California. We conduct field trips, we have trainings, exercise, we do research, and in every way possible, we try to preserve, protect, and coordinate treasures of Alta and Baja California rock art, of which there are many and diverse. We also work closely with Native Americans and partner with them to recognize and protect sacred sites. So for more info about the fabulous California Rock Art Foundation, you can go to carockart.org. Also, I'm open to give me a call, 805-312-2261. We would welcome sponsorship or underwriting, helping us to defray the costs of our podcasts, and also membership in California Rock Art Foundation. And of course, donations, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit scientific and educational corporation. God bless everyone out there in podcast land. Okay, out there in Archaeology Podcast land, this is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel. Pleasure to be back on board. I hope you're enjoying this journey. This is the 16th episode of the Rock Art Podcast, and we're graced and blessed to have a wonderful gentleman. He's a personal friend. He's a member of the California Rock Art Foundation. He is a gifted photographer and also an artist of sorts, I would say, using his photography. And his name is Jerman Cervera. Jerman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Pleasure to be here with you guys.
Well, yeah, this is very exciting to have you. Can I share your humble occupation with the listeners?
Of course.
So Jerman is different than some of our other interviewees. Sometimes I call them guest scholars. He's a man that's a truck driver that became passionate about his efforts in photography and rock art, for that matter, and has plunged doing a deep dive into the mysteries of the indigenous cosmology and religion. And I think we're going to hear his passion in this story. So Jerman, I'll let you go. The opening question, of course, is how the heck did you ever get involved with any of this vis-a-vis photography, rock art, anthropology, archaeology, Native Americans, all the above? Let's hear a bit about your background.
Yeah, my background is, I would say it's unusual. I have no professional background in regards of archaeology. Like most people that would be into rock art have some kind of background or professional education. I'm the complete opposite. I've been doing photography for about 15 years. I've always considered my photography work different. Been obsessed with astrophotography since I started photography.
What got you into photography? Let's kind of open up on that particular plane as well. I think that's unusual for people to be as passionate and as adept as you are in the field of photography. How did you get into it and why?
I've thought about that before, and I've realized since I can remember as a kid, I've always been into photography in a weird way. Now that I think back to it, growing up, I would go to field trips with school and stuff. I remember as a kid, my mom would always collect photos. So I think that's where I get the love for photography is from her.
Yes.
Because she has albums on albums of just childhood pictures, like she loved taking pictures. Every time we went on a field trip, she would always buy us, disposable cameras. Those, 24 picture little disposable cameras. And she would always tell us, take pictures of your friends and you guys and anything that you like so you can have memories. She always pushed, make sure you have memories so when you grow up, you can look back to these and remember your childhood memories. So obviously I would come back, she would go develop the instant camera, and I would come back with like pictures of trees, of animals, nothing of me and my friends. And she would get so upset. She would say, why do you take pictures of this? Take pictures of you and your friends. And I'd be like, no, this is what I like to take pictures of. Now that I look back to it, that's kind of where I started with that. But I had no idea it would grow into a passion slash hobby slash job where, you know, I do make money from it. It's not my full-time job, but senior year was when I needed one more elective to graduate in high school, and it was some random stuff. One of them was PE, and I for sure did not want to do PE again. So one of the other electives was photography. So I was like, sure, I'll take that. And then that's when I truly discovered my love for it. You know, 2002, 2003 is where digital cameras were breaking through. Film was starting to stay behind. They basically taught us rule of thirds, lighting, composition, shutter speed, just basic photography stuff and how to frame a photo. And my graduation gift was a DSLR camera.
Well, that certainly shows the direction you were headed. So how did that love of photography eventually get you into this related area, taking pictures of rock art?
Well, when I started doing photography, like with an actual camera, I've always been into colorful stuff, sunsets. As a kid, I always used to draw characters, paint. So I had somewhat of an artistic interest, and I would always look at things on an artistic level, like something colorful. BMX bikes that I had, I would always paint them. Like I was always doing something in regards of colors and art. Then I started photography. Most people, when they start photography, they start taking pictures of people and their family and kids. I wanted nothing to do with that. I wanted to create art in a digital way.
So your particular take on photography was very different. It wasn't people oriented. It was art oriented. You saw photography as a means of creating a world of imagination and creativity in art. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was basically trying to express myself. I've always been artistic in one way or another, and I figured out that with the camera, I could basically paint my own world. I could create my own world. One of my favorite things to do to this day is taking pictures, you know, around my hometown, places that people drive through every day, and getting an angle and then completely editing a photo where once you see it, you're like, hey, I know where that's at. But then you see my vision, my interpretation of it. It's a weird feeling knowing you can create your own world in a photo, manipulate light, I mean, the world is yours. You can create your own world and people can see it through your eyes. And it's a pretty amazing feeling. It's almost surreal.
And how recently did you transfer over and get involved with sort of the field of archaeology, rock art, and let's even say, I call it archaeoastronomy or the celestial, the sky realm as well?
Well, since a kid, I was always, you know, the pyramids have always fascinated me, hieroglyphs. So I remember a few years back, I saw an episode of California Gold on PBS, and
Yul Hauser.
Yeah, I was mind blown just seeing, I had no idea those existed. I knew of rock art, but I always assumed it was somewhere really far and like not to my reach in any way, you know, and then seeing that, I just couldn't believe it. That's kind of what sparked my interest in rock art, where it made it feel easier to access because it's in California. Hey, one day I can visit sites like that.
You're talking about the Coso rock art of Eastern California that Yul Hauser took us on a trip for. So when did you start to actually photograph rock art?
It was basically 2016, I believe. I'm a late bloomer.
Yeah, a few years ago, not maybe 4 years ago?
Yeah, pretty much. And I did a tour at the museum in Ridgecrest, which was to Little Petroglyph Canyon. That was my first time seeing any rock art in person.
And how did that make you feel? What did that speak to you as? What kind of message did that produce for you in your heart and soul and mind?
It's the connection. It's the unknown. They were trying to tell a story, storytelling. Will we ever know what they were trying to say? No. We can assume, we can guess. I feel like there's enough understanding of where people can relate and guess what certain things mean or what they were trying to say. But in reality, it's like we will never know. One thing I understand is that they were trying to tell a story and they wanted it to be told through time.
So was that your first rock art photography when you took the trip down Little Petroglyph Canyon in the Coso Range?
Yes, that was my first trip. I was just like a kid in Disneyland. It was a really short trip, I remember, and it just kind of poked me and like I couldn't get enough of it.
Where'd you go from there?
A few months after that, I discovered California rock art through a friend has gone on tours, and I've learned so much from him.
Mm-hmm.
His name's Jeffrey.
Okay.
He kind of showed me the ropes. Hey, join this group. They do trips, and kind of explained to me how the group worked. I just joined the group. All I knew was, hey, they do rock art trips. And then I got more involved. I got involved with the group itself, and from just the stuff they post and the emails and the website. And I saw, okay, I see what they do. They're not only giving people the chance to see stuff like that, but preserving it. I mean, everything I've learned about rock art has been through the California Rock Art Foundation, because it opened up a whole different world for me.
Where did you go next in terms of your connection to rock art? What other places have you visited since Little Petroglyph Canyon?
I did the following trip I did with them was Little Lake.
Okay.
Right on the Coso Range.
Mm-hmm.
That place blew my mind.
Why did it blow your mind, Jerman?
It's just, how can I put this? It's trapped in time. It's timeless. It's so much rock art there. So everything is just frozen in time. Where most rock art sites I visit, you can feel the energy. I can feel the energy. And it's just, the feeling is so real. It's to see something so old, just, it makes you, standing there in front of it makes you feel like you travel back to time when it was originally done. And, you start to appreciate everything about it. And somebody there thousands of years ago stood there and carved, those petroglyphs or painted the pictographs. And Little Lake is just amazing. There's so much going on, pictographs and petroglyphs.
Where'd you go next?
I did another tour in Little Petroglyph Canyon. There, I did the other place in Exeter.
Rocky Hill. That place was... yeah, that place was a strange place. So much energy there. Yes. And then I guess you went on a cultural tour, didn't you?
Yeah, I did recently do the Baja, California trip to the painted murals in Baja, California.
Wow. How was that?
That was just amazing.
So it sounds like you're having quite the grand adventure.
Yeah.
In the next minute and a half, baby, we can at least open up the discussion about some of your innovative ways of capturing the cosmos.
Sounds good.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
So I've been photographing the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest interest when it comes to astrophotography. There's what we call a Milky Way season.
Mm-hmm.
We could only see the core of the Milky Way early April to like mid-September is when we can see the core. And that's when photographers like to photograph it.
Okay.
Once that season is over, we don't see the core at night. It rises during the day, so we can't see it. I've been shooting the Milky Way, photographing it for years. There's different techniques of doing it, different ways.
Mm-hmm. Hold that thought. We're almost out of time. And I think in the next segment, we'll get into the astral photography. See you on the flip-flop.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ROCKART. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. You're listening to the Rock Art Podcast, hosted by Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'm the president and founder of the California Rock Art Foundation, and we are graced and pleased to have a remarkable rock art photographer and artist, Jerman Cervera, to share with us his passion and his background vis-a-vis photographing rock art and creating artistic renditions, and also experiencing rock art as what's been called a rock art explorer. So why don't you tell them a little bit about your experience going down to Baja? That must have been a grand adventure. Where exactly did you go in Baja?
We went to Sierra de San Francisco.
Okay, that's Sierra de San Francisco, yes.
Once we went down to Canyon, we basically spent a few days on mules, camping out in the wilderness.
On mules? Why were you on the mules?
It's how you get to them. They're so remote. We left our vehicle up on top in a small little ranch.
Okay.
Met with the vaqueros, which are English for cowboys. They're basically the tour guides, and packed all our belongings on burros. We rode mules and basically followed the burros down the canyon in very steep, narrow trails, all the way down to the bottom where the river flows. And we set up camp there, and the rest is history. The whole place is magical. Massive cave paintings. They're all basically in the same style. Human figures, animal figures, black and red pictographs. Some are one on top of the other, like almost seems like it's different generations on top of each other, and very similar story that they're depicting, almost like an anthropomorphic figure painted black and red. Mm-hmm. Pretty amazing. They're giant figures.
How big are they?
Well, some were, appeared to be 10 feet and larger.
Those are enormous.
Yeah, there's different stories on how they reach, because some are in very high places. Cave overhangs. Just seeing the pictographs and just imagining how they, built human scaffolds and palm tree scaffolds to get all the way up there and paint them, and pretty amazing.
So these paintings are found in what context? What's the canvas, the rock canvas that they paint them on?
Not exactly sure what kind of rock it was, but...
Are they in caves?
Yeah, not like what we would think of a cave, an actual cave. It's more like overhang. So part of a big slab that overhangs and creates like a cave.
So kind of like a rock shelter, huh?
Yeah, basically exactly what it is. A shelter that, some parts go in deep 10, 15 feet, but they painted them on the slab that goes up and creates the shelter, and they're just vertical, and they go in all sorts of directions. Cueva Pintada was amazing. So many pictographs there. Dr. Allen, you probably have an idea of the number of paintings they believe are in there, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just enormous. So how long were you there down in Baja?
Basically 4 days.
4 days, okay.
Yeah, 4 days and 4 nights. Every day was an adventure. Got up early in the morning and set up either hiking or on the mules and go visit different sites. The whole experience was amazing.
So it's down in an area, I guess, that doesn't have much in the way of access. You said it's rather remote and you have to get on a mule. You ride the mules and the burros. What do? They carry the luggage?
Yeah, the burros, vaqueros put like an A-frame on them and strap it down and basically load up on each side of the burro, evenly load up the weight. So all of our belongings go on there, and they're carrying, 50 to 100 pounds per burro.
Are there people that live in that area or no?
Down in what they call the ranch where we stayed in camp, 2 ladies and a younger guy, aunt, mom, and son or nephew. They live off of goat cheese. So it's pretty amazing watching them work, how he gets out, 4 a.m, lets out like over 200 goats, lets them roam around in the Sierra, brings them all back in to milk them.
Mm-hmm.
It's an everyday thing for him. So that's what they live off of, and they're the ones who take care of that property in the bottom, and that's where we camp, where we stayed there every night, left in the morning.
So it sounds like it's very, very thinly populated. There's not many people in that part of Baja, California, is there?
No, it's very remote. There's a few ranches driving up into the ranch where we park.
Yes.
But each little ranch has a population of maybe 10, 15 people. It's all families. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very thinly populated. So the vaqueros, do they live in that area?
Yeah, most of them live in the ranch, in one of those ranches there. When they're not doing tours for the rock art, they live off goat cheese as well, and they live remotely. No cell phone signal, no power. Most of them have solar. Kind of amazing to see how they, in a way, updated. The ranch down at the bottom where we stayed, it's 3 of them that live down there, and they have solar power, which they can run a satellite internet to there, and they can still communicate with family outside of the ranch, which is pretty amazing how they're kind of caught up in technology.
Yeah. So after you returned from your trip to Baja, I guess you also worked on a contracted project.
I've done several of them. One we did in the Mojave Preserve.
And what was out at Mary's Cave in the Mojave Preserve?
Yeah, Mary's Cave, that was one of the projects I worked on. Super magical place. That's more of a cave shelter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shelter, but it sinks in about 5-6 feet in, where it creates more of a cave feeling to it. Pictographs all over the ceiling, different anthropomorphs and figurines, and it's just stuff everywhere. Cupules on the bottom, mortars.
And what are cupules?
The small indentations. I believe it's where the females would indent on the different rock surfaces.
I see. Yes.
We shot that site. There's other rock art sections in there. We visited them as well. A lot of pictographs and petroglyphs in there, just the whole area. It's pretty amazing.
So in our previous segment, you began to discuss or talk about how you did some of this astral photography. What is astral photography?
It involves different things. I like to shoot the Milky Way. There's other people that shoot galaxies and stuff with different equipment, but it's basically shooting the stars, night photography. What I like to do is when I shoot the Milky Way core, there's so much planning to photograph the Milky Way. You have to shoot when it's a new moon or no moon in the sky. So it takes so much planning. So I track the moon. You can't shoot the Milky Way when the moon is out. It has to all fall into place.
How many days of the month are even available to shoot the Milky Way when the moon is not out?
You can shoot it when the moon is out. You just have to shoot it before the moon rises.
Before the moon rises, I see. Okay.
Yes, it's just basically during Milky Way season, it's tracking the moon phases. When there is a moon, you can still shoot the Milky Way. Mm-hmm. You have basically a good week out of the month. You can shoot the Milky Way when perfect with no interruption of the moon. Other than that, you just have to plan it. I use different apps on my phone to track the moon. A lot of times when I'm driving around out in the desert for work, I see a composition of a foreground that I like. Then I start with different apps, start planning where the Milky Way would rise in that area. Once I have a composition set up, I usually will pin it on my phone, then go back to it when I'm actually shooting the Milky Way. So it's so much planning. Then I started thinking, hey, what if I shoot Milky Way with rock art? So then as I started getting into that, I've seen some photographers do it, and it's amazing. Started getting into that, then I realized stuff lines up. A lot of the rock art lines up facing the Milky Way. So archaeoastronomy, then I discovered that, and I realized hey, they were in tune with the sky. They knew exactly the constellations, when everything was in what place during what time of the year. Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing with the knowledge they had. And I've discovered that through photographing the Milky Way and trying to find a composition with rock art that, hey man, they were purposely doing petroglyphs in one area, or the petroglyphs they would carve had some meaning to archaeoastronomy. Like they were so in tune with the night sky, and it's amazing what they were doing.
So you filmed Mary's Cave, which was a contracted piece for us to do a study and help nominate it to the National Register. Now that particular cave has been studied for decades, and because it's found to have archaeoastronomical significance vis-a-vis it's an alignment and can be seen when you're in the cave. I guess you can look at the summer solstice sunrise, which is quite significant. But what you did was you somehow had to lighten up the cave somehow, and then you had to frame the Milky Way coming over the back of the cave, over the sort of edge of that rockscape. That was amazing. That picture was incorporated into our National Register nomination, and people's eyes pop out, their jaw drops when they see that image. How did you capture that?
That particular image took so much planning and just getting it right, because we had roughly like a 15-minute window. It was early Milky Way season, so there was a moon rising that weekend. We weren't planning to shoot the Milky Way. We were there on assignment shooting Mary's Cave, and at night I was with Ryan. He's an archaeologist that works for California Rock Art Foundation. It's kind of my partner in crime, where every time I go on assignment with California Rock Art, it's with him. We do everything together. So we thought about, we were having dinner and we said, hey, let's try to shoot the Milky Way. Maybe it lines up because on the direction.
You didn't even know if it was going to line up.
No, I told Ryan, hey, it's probably going to work. If not, it's going to be super close.
Let's cut it off there and we'll pick it up on the next segment. That's a great way to sort of end this one. And I'll see all my podcast listeners on the next and final segment. Thank you.
Save big money now at Menards. Mastercraft has been making great doors inside and out for over 50 years. Choose from the best in-stock selection of doors, ready to take home today. Or design your door your way in-store or on Menards.com. Save big on Mastercraft doors at Menards, America's #1 home improvement retailer for customer satisfaction, according to J.D. Power. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Save big money at Menards.
So welcome back, podcast listeners. This is the Rock Art Podcast with your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel. And we have an extra special guest with us today, Jerman Cervera, who's a remarkable rock art photographer and an artist. And he has some tremendous stories to share. So in this last segment of our 16th episode of the Rock Art Podcast, tell us a bit more about this bit of serendipity and good luck with the Mary's Cave rock art astral photography shoot, Jerman.
Like I was saying earlier, we had this crazy idea during dinner. Hey, let's go try to see if the Milky Way core lines up somewhere near Mary's Cave. And I assumed it did because of the direction the cave opening was. So sure enough, after dinner, we drove up to the site, hiked about, half a mile or something into the cave in pitch dark. That's the best part about doing astrophotography is you're out in the middle of nowhere, 2-3 in the morning, just a headlamp and camera gear. It's the connection. You're just one with nature. And not going to lie, it was kind of sketchy hiking through the terrain at night.
Was that the night that I was there with you or no? The one where your camera fell down the...
Yes, that's the same night. That whole night was an experience.
Oh my word. Tell them about that.
So I use several apps on my phone to help me track the Milky Way. For anybody listening that is into astrophotography or wants to get into astrophotography, there's a great app called Photo Pills. It's like $10 to purchase, but you can track the moon, all the phases. It tells you when it rises, when it sets. It gives a night augmented reality. Basically, you open that section of the app and you point your phone up in the sky and you can rotate what would be that version of the night sky, and you just rotate it with your finger and it basically rotates the Milky Way and it's switching the time. So then once you find the Milky Way core, for example, that's what I use it for. Once I find the core completely vertical, it'll show me a time on the top left corner, and it shows me what time the core is going to be perfectly vertical.
In other words, it tells you when the Milky Way is going to show up so that you're not waiting there forever for it to appear in the sky.
You know exactly when to shoot it according to the composition your foreground at.
Does it normally show up the same time of the night every night or no?
No, it changes throughout the summer, early summer. It's 2-3 in the morning by the time the Milky Way core is vertical. Sometimes 3:30ish. Midsummer, late summer, it's like 12 o'clock, then 11 o'clock. Early September, it's roughly 9:30 p.m. when the Milky Way core is vertical. So after mid-September, it's possible, but it's almost impossible to shoot it because it's too bright outside still.
I see. So you have to get it when the time is right and when the moon is appropriate. And you've also got to find the actual alignment or angle for a piece of rock art or a landform or something else to be associated with and in alignment so you can take a proper photograph.
Yeah, and there's so much to it behind the scenes that if you're there watching another photographer shoot astrophotography and then see the finished results, it's amazing because nobody will understand all the work that's involved until they see it firsthand, because they see the images and they're like, wow, this is amazing. But, you have to get all these things lined up perfect to get a single exposure, everything in one shot.
So first of all, it's all the planning. Then how do you get a picture of the sky that looks so distinctive and so clear? What is it that you have to do?
It's called basically long exposures, leaving your shutter open for a set time. You can't go for too long because the stars will start trailing.
Yeah.
There's options like I have a star tracker where I mount the star tracker on top of the tripod, the camera on top of that, and then you track the night sky. So your camera is rotating with the earth. So it allows you to do 3-4 minute exposures.
No.
Yes.
No, I can't believe. You mean you have a machine that's attached to the camera so it tracks the sky so it can give a long exposure and so it doesn't show the trailings of the stars?
Yes, that's the fancy way to do it because
word.
After 25 seconds, you'll see star trails, the stars. So with the star tracker, it's a pain in the butt to align it, but once you get it right, you leave your shutter open you can do for 3 to 4 minutes. And that's how you're able to produce the Milky Way core where it looks fake. It looks all colorful. And
it looks so clear and so wondrous and so bright and have so much depth to it. It's a cosmological beauty. It's a living mystery. It's unbelievable.
Like in Mary's Cave, what I do a lot is light paint. It's called light painting.
And what does that mean?
You use lights, LED flashlights, headlamps, depending on what kind of light source. Literally paint your surface or whatever you're trying to use as a foreground. You paint it with the flashlight. So you're painting light onto a surface, and when you have the shutter open, creating a long exposure, once the shutter closes, the surface that you painted is exposed as if it was, daylight. Mary's Cave, for example, that night we went out.
Yeah.
I set a few LED lights inside the cave, and I had a cell phone light, which I love using because it's the softest, dimmest. It gives you enough light to light up the background of a subject, and it doesn't blow up because there's so much to it. If you have too much light while you're doing a long exposure, your highlights are blown out. So then you ruin the shot. If you go too long of an exposure, you don't set up your camera settings properly, you get a blown out highlight. So it's so much trial and error, so much playing around. It takes so much to get the perfect shot.
After you take the picture and you have to post-process it and do certain things to enhance what you've taken as a picture or clarify it or get greater resolution, how much post-capturing the picture does it take? Is it a short process?
No, astrophotography stuff can take a while because it's just adjusting all the highlights, shadows. I try to only not manipulate the photo too much, but just adjust the exposure,
I see.
the saturation, try to make it look as real as possible, but detailed.
So you're trying to create something that is in fact realistic and sort of portrays kind of the mystery and the awe and just the beauty of the landscape and the night sky with the prehistoric Native American activities. And it kind of marries the religious nature and sacred nature of the place, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've always seen rock art like it was an artist's interpretation of whatever story they were trying to tell. So when I document rock art, when I photograph it, I like to give it my artistic view of it. I love doing long exposures. During the day, I have a natural density filter kit that I use on my camera.
Mm-hmm.
During the day, I can do long exposures. You get clouds to streak, water to look silky, smooth, because you basically put a natural density filter, which blocks all the light coming in, and it allows your camera to do a long exposure and not be overexposed.
Did you teach yourself all this, or did you take other classes to learn some of these things?
No, it's all self-taught.
All self-taught.
I've always
Amazing.
been a hands-on guy, and YouTube. You got to love YouTube.
Yeah.
A lot of it trial and error, just, okay, this didn't work out, then try this, and just always trying to grow, always trying to be a better artist, try something different. I do incorporate, when I photograph rock art, I do incorporate my techniques. I like doing, setting up my camera on a tripod, shooting the rock art with the natural density filter and doing a long exposure, streaking the clouds above the rock art. Mm-hmm. When I edit the rock art, I bring out all the petroglyphs, the details on them.
You make them brighter. You make them more distinct. You increase the resolution, correct?
Yeah, basically what de-stretch does to a photo, but I do it manually, not invert the colors the way it does. When I edit rock art, sometimes it looks unreal. When you see it with the naked eye, it doesn't look that way because I've incorporated my editing techniques and my shooting styles with rock art where I can make everything pop out. I can bring it back. I feel like I can bring it back to life.
Yeah, you make it dance and sing, right?
Yeah, I use strobe lights when I shoot rock art or flash. During the day, I adjust my settings to where I can shoot with the flash or a strobe light and light up the rock panel where it brings out so many petroglyphs that aren't visible to the naked eye during the day.
You can see them
depending on the time of the day. You can see different petroglyphs that aren't visible at a later time of the day.
Yeah.
With the flash, you can actually bring all that stuff out.
Yes.
Because you're manipulating light.
Because sometimes the glancing light or the flash, as you say, allows one to see images that are there that are very, very ancient. They're almost completely occluded or covered up by the desert varnish. But they are still there, but they're just remnant images vis-a-vis the concavities or they're sculptural, but they're very slightly sculptural.
Yeah, and with the proper lighting, just like you've seen during the day, early morning, you can see some petroglyphs. During the day, you can see other ones, depending on the way the light changes.
Right.
Well, with the flash and the strobe, you can actually recreate that at any time of the day if you light it up properly, where you can bring up all these petroglyphs that are not visible with the naked eye during the bright daylight or vice versa. All those will pop up. Like I said, I use different techniques when it comes to shooting.
What's your favorite image that you've ever taken? You produce such gorgeous, jaw-dropping photographs. Do you have any sort of favorite glyph, either a painting or a petroglyph that you've done? Is there one that sort of tugged at you and just you really were riveted to those particular images?
It's the panel and little petroglyph where it's got the anthropomorphic figures. It's way in the top. It's the most popular one.
Yeah, it's the one that sort of acts as almost a trademark for the American Rock Art Research Association, and I think also serves in part as sort of a hallmark for the Matarango Museum, doesn't it?
Yes, that one. There's something magical about that.
They're sort of decorated animal human figures that have quail plume headdresses and everything else you can imagine. It's probably the most photographed panel in the entire canyon.
It makes you think, like, what were they seeing or what were they thinking? What were they witnessing where they were depicting, these humans and the creativity behind it? Even if it was just their imagination of just how creative they were when you see rock art and petroglyphs like that, it's amazing.
Yeah. We only have about a minute left. Is there any sort of concluding reflections you should give the listeners about rock art photography or about your experiences or adventure with rock art?
Yeah, I just like to, not everybody who's into rock has a professional background. I'm a perfect example. I'm just a normal person with the camera that, photographer that got into rock art, and my passion for it has grown through the years, and it's for anybody and everybody. If you're into it, don't be afraid to photograph it and be artistic with it, because that's what I like to do. And my rendition of rock art, it's my visions, my artistic interpretations of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jerman. You're quite a blessing, and it's just a wonder to talk to you, and I can just feel and sense your passion. Well, thank you, podcast listeners. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Art Podcast with Dr. Alan Garfinkel and Chris Webster. You can find this podcast on the educational podcast app Lyceum, Lyceum, and wherever you find podcasts. Find show notes and contact information at www.arcpodnet.com/rockart. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing this podcast with your family and friends. This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.